Thanks, Megan. Okay, well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to present to you a little bit about the rare lichens of Mount Rainier National Park. Yeah, so slide, please. So I just want to start off by just commenting a little bit about the study that we conducted out there in Mount Rainier this last summer and fall. We were looking at visitor use impacts along trails. So we did a series of transects where we laid out a tape across the trail, and then at various distances from the trail out in either direction, we did a series of 1 meter square plots where we recorded all of the species that we encountered within those plots, within those grid squares. And then we also did a series of basically around 1 acre size circular plots where we recorded all the species that we encountered in there as well. And as a result of that, we were able to worked in 5 different areas in the high elevation and the low elevation, and we yeah, I'm realizing there's a typo here. We did 663 1 meter square plot frames, and we collected information, occurrence records on about 4,000 individual occurrence records. We are now finished with the identification process, which Dave talked about the bryophytes and some of the rare things that we found during the study. And we are in the process still of analyzing the data, and we're looking at a variety of different characters. We're looking at the different morpho groups, you know, the crustose or foliose, that kind of thing. And we haven't turned in our final report. We're still in the process of doing the analysis, so I'm not going to go into too many details around that. What I'm going to be focusing on today is just talking about some of the rare species that we encountered as part of this. And again, we spent a lot of time looking at these little squares on the landscape. And so this isn't a methodology that would be this isn't a methodology that would turn up, wouldn't be the way that you would turn up as many rares as you could, but we did encounter some along the way. So is everyone able to see the slides? Okay, great. Sounds like we can. So hopefully there's the same symposium next year, and we can give you some detailed results of our study at that point. So next slide, please. So again, the 4 areas that we focused on, the high elevation areas were Paradise and Sunrise, 2 areas that get a lot of visitor use, and then the low elevation areas, Carbon River, Ohanapekosh, and Cedar Flat, which is just right near Ohanapekosh. So these are the 4 areas that we were in, or 5 areas. Next slide, please. So first, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about lichens. For those of you that might not be familiar with what lichens are, they are at the scale of the mosses and other bryophytes that we've been talking about, but this is a different group of organisms. These are organisms that are fungus, mostly with algae or cyanobacteria inside of them. And basically, if it looks like a little tiny miniature plant, it's probably a moss. If it looks like something that Dr. Seuss would have come up with, then it's most likely a lichen. And so here we've got some of the common lichens that we encountered in the lower elevation old growth forest displayed here. Sporophorus, Loberia oregana, Nephroma occultum. These are all species which occur regularly in old growth forests in Washington. Next slide, please. We also, encountered, see here are some of the more common species of crustose lichens. These are a lichen that is just growing as a crust across the surface. And these are also in the group of things that we looked at. And they can grow over the top of rocks or wood, or even growing right on the surface of bryophytes like this lopatium here that you see on the right. But these are three of the more common species that you would see in this kind of an old growth setting. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to just chat with you a little bit about some of the rare species that we encountered. Because of the short time here, I'm just going to kind of focus on a couple of them, things that were of interest. The first one here is a species called Pseudocyphalaria rainerensis. It's also known as the old growth specklebelly. And this is a lichen that the type locality for this lichen is in Ohanapekosh. So that was the first place that it was described from. And you can see here on the bottom left a picture of one of my colleagues in this area with some giant trees there. That Ohanapekosh and Grove of the Patriarchs area has some massive trees, and that's the setting where you're going to find this lichen. Also, what struck me, I've seen this lichen in a lot of different places and studied it over the years. And one of the things that I came away with from this site is just the massive colonies of this lichen. I mean, sometimes you'll find it as a little tiny piece here and there, or in more pristine areas, you might find bigger colonies, but I've never seen it growing as prolifically or in as huge of a biomass as it was in this site. So that was really impressive to me. On the right-hand side, you'll see some, these are the known locations of this lichen. So you can see it's a Pacific Northwest endemic, and the majority of the sites are known from the Washington Cascades. It's also known as far up into Southeast Alaska and then down into around the Umpqua area. There's one dot that's shouldn't be that way out in Eastern Oregon. That's actually not correctly mapped, but quite a few locations of this, but it's one that's susceptible to air quality degradation and habitat degradation. So something to keep an eye out, and an interesting one from the old growth. Next slide, please. Another rare lichen that we found in the old growth there in Cedar Flat is Nephroma occultum, which this is not a very good picture of it. And this is the picture I got in the, okay, I guess I've only got a couple minutes, so I'm going to keep on moving on. Next slide, please. This is a Brigantia praetermissa. This is a pretty rare lichen, only collected in Washington, as far as I can tell, in two different times in the past. It's distinguished by having this nice orange upper surface and a very large muriform spore, and then this bright red K plus reaction when you under the microscope. And it's usually found on cedars. Next slide, please. Of the two known locations in Washington, one of the locations that I found interesting was the first time it was collected in Washington was in the Longmire area, which is in the southern part of Mount Rainier National Park. It was collected there in 1906. Okay, next slide, please. Now I'll chat with you for a second about some of the upper elevation species. These are some of the things that you would find regularly in the upper elevations: Solarina, Rhizocarpon, Thamnolia. These are common species. Next slide, please. And we were able to locate one rare up there, the Cornicula normerica, which is also been found in Washington a few times, but mostly in the high elevations around Mount Rainier. There's a picture of Dave taking a photo of it on this nice rock outcrop there in the Sunrise area. Next slide, please. Another interesting one for us was Tingyopsidium sinnomensis, which has a really unique color and shape to it. This one was found on a rock outcrop again in the Sunrise area, only known from 6 locations in Washington. And then, okay, I think that might be it. Next slide. This is the last species I'll talk about, Umbilicaria lingii, which is an Arctic disjunct from further north and known from a couple of locations in Washington, Mount Baker, and Sunrise. Yeah, next slide, please. That's it. That's a picture of our field crew and then some visitor use along trails in the park. Thank you very much.
Is that a marmot?
Yeah, it's a marmot just chilling there.
With the lichen. Very cool. Yep. Thank you very much. Well, again, folks, if you have questions, please put them in the chat or raise your virtual hand. We don't see anything in the chat yet, but we'll give folks a minute to type. Let's see. So was this a project? Oh, go ahead.
That was a quick 15 minutes.
I know. Well, the 10 minutes goes real fast for our 2 remaining presenters. If you haven't seen yet, it goes fast. You know, we have a Daphne saying, "Good work, John and SBS." You know, I'll ask a question. My disclaimer is that I'm not a scientist. I'm very much a layperson. So this is a very layperson question. But what's your favorite lichen and why?
Well, I think from this project, my favorite lichen was the Tingyopsidiasis sinnomensis. I can't say that word very well, but that was a cool one for me and one that I wasn't expecting to see up there, and it just has a really neat growth form, and so I'm going to say that as my favorite.
Awesome. I love those spooky, like really dark ones. Those are really cool.
Yeah. Thank you very much.